Good evening, everyone. Tonight, myself, Mitch, David, and Grace will be presenting on the Vineland Adaptive Behavioral Skills, third edition. So to get us started, we should provide some context as to what it actually is. So the Vineland 3 is an assessment that is used to measure the depth of an individual's adaptive behaviors. So the whole goal behind it is to identify where an individual is excelling in relation to adaptive behaviors, and then where they need additional support, because the idea here is to promote success in their daily lives. So similar to the KTA3, we have domains and subdomains here. So there are 5 domains and 11 subdomains. So those 5 main domains are communication, daily living skills, socialization, motor skills, and then maladaptive. So as far as communication is concerned, the subdomains are receptive communication, expressive communication, and written communication. And then with daily living skills, you have the personal living skills, domestic, and then community. Socialization, you have interpersonal relationships, play and leisure, and then coping skills, motor skills, gross and fine, and then maladaptive, internalizing, externalizing, and then critical items. So how is the test administered? There are 4 different ways in which you can administer the Vineland 3. So the first is in an all digital format where you administer it digitally, you score it digitally, and then you report, and you do the reporting also digitally. The second way that you can do it is manually. So you administer and score and do the reporting all on paper. The third option is hybrid. This is the one that is most commonly used and selected. So you administer the assessment via paper, and then you score and do all the reporting on Q Global. The last one, 4, is a mixed approach. And so in this instance, you're going to have multiple raters. And some raters will use paper for administration, and then the other raters will use an online format for administration. And so all scoring and reporting, though, finally will be completed on Q Global. So what's really different is how it's administered. Some is on paper and some is online, all at the same time. Who qualifies for the test? So I got all of this qualification criteria from Pearson. So it's commonly used for individuals who have one of the following. So an intellectual and developmental disability, ASD, ADHD, TBIs, hearing impairments, and dementia or Alzheimer's. The ages supported by this test typically depend on the type of form that's being used. So if you're using the interview form, the age range is essentially birth until 90 years. If you're using the parent or caregiver form, also the same age range. And then the teacher form, anywhere from 3 to 21 years. And then publisher and price. So the test is published by Pearson, and the price of the test essentially depends on what you're wanting to purchase. So whether you want comprehensive tests or domains, if you need it in another language such as Spanish, and then if you want the digital option versus the paper option. So you can get a kit with all of the information and all of the content necessary for the program for as expensive as $517 to as inexpensive as $245. The administration reports are $4 each per one that you request. And then the teacher, parent, or caregiver interview forms can also range in price, $54 to $108. If you want a subscription on Q Global, it also comes with a price, $71, or a 3-year Q Global subscription, $200. Then the manuals for both Q Global and comprehensive are $181.
All right, so test history. This is the newest version, but it was published in 2016, so it's got a little bit of years on it. The original version of it was published in 1984 and itself was a revision of the Vineland Social Mobility Score, which I believe dated like 1940s or 1950s. And then the Vineland 2 was published in 2004. That version added some new added motor skills domain assessment. The current version increased the scales by something like 35%. Next slide. So the norm sample was created between 2014 and 2015, based on population data accessed in 2014. What it wasn't clear to me was whether this was simply that it was accessed in 2014 and therefore was relying on like the 2010 census data, or if it was some sort of updated non-official or not the major, but some sort of supplementary. It also it's interesting because this is pre-COVID when pandemic, and so there should be some COVID-19 related census data that we could be using that might reflect kind of different geographic arrangements. And per the publication summary form, this is a normative group test, and it was designed to represent the US population in the age range covered for each form. And we have that data more detail on the last slide. I did. So the sample size for the norm was 6,535 people, and it's designed based around sex, education level, race and ethnicity, and geographic region, with those regions being the Northeast, North Central, South, and West. And it does include special populations, mostly those that are IDEA qualifying categories. So autism, developmental delay, emotional disturbance, intellectual disabilities, SLD, speech and language impairments, and then any other qualifying category.
So I looked at the reliability and validity of the test. Some analysis is supplied in the manual for the Vineland 3 regarding rater item and form level comparisons. The Vineland 3 uses a two-form approach. One is given to parents and caregivers, while the other one is given to the teacher. So because you have two raters at the same, always working at the same time, the test actually relies on looking at that data comparatively and relying on inter-rater correlations to actually determine useful data. There's going to be some discrepancy always between the two settings, but when you look at the two together, you can find what's statistically meaningful. The same conclusions can thus be drawn for form level. So again, the forms are not exactly the same for teachers and parents, but you can look at the two forms and see that there's comparative results, which gives it some validity, or sorry, some reliability. The other thing that I would add is that this test, the Vineland 3, uses an additional scale, the V scale, to determine the significant difference between the settings. So the manual itself says when results across forms are similar, the user can be confident in using those results in decision making. When results differ by 2 or 3 points on this V scale, it's important to try to determine how much this affects the true behavioral differences in different settings. And that just goes back to what we've been talking about all course, in that you have to use multiple data points to make decisions for the learner. This is an example of how the test uses those two forms. So you see the two respondents, a student's mother and a student's teacher. And not only does this help you identify where their strengths are, but again, you can see that most items are the same at school and at home, which lends it some sense of inter-rater reliability. And then in addition, you can see some retest comparison, or at least some is provided in the manual. It focuses particularly on these GSVs, or growth score values, to determine the context of progress. But again, you're only looking at targeted subdomains when you do a retest to identify growth, like for the targeted area. You can see comparative data throughout, which lends it some retest reliability. And of course, this is just as one example to show what they studied in their pilot testing. Also in the manual, the test creation is documented through a step-by-step process, and that all includes a thorough review, which uses expert panels and pilot studies, two aspects that were mentioned specifically to determine validity for content. The pilot test shows strong construct validity, even though it doesn't provide specific statistics. It does describe that 6 psychometric criteria were used. Particularly important for construct validity would be appropriate developmental trend, good statistical fit, and the ability to differentiate typically developing examinees from those with a developmental delay or intellectual disability diagnosis. Throughout, the authors continue to talk about eyeball analysis as an expert opinion, some of which we just discussed last week, or last class meeting rather, which is always going to be included in testing.
Lastly, my question was, is this a good test or would we recommend it using it with students and with specific examples? So we've got utility here. So in evaluating whether to recommend the Vineland adaptive behavior scales for students, its merits are evident in assessing essential life skills like daily living and motor skills. Makes a great tool for understanding our students that have diverse needs. An example was when a student has difficulty with essential self-care or basic household tasks, the test can identify the challenges which enable educators to then tailor interventions to meet those needs or to help those students meet those needs. So its proven reliability and validity add to the trustworthiness of the test and ensure its assessments are consistent and accurate. But then we want to consider such as the potential for subjective biases, of course, in reporting by different caregivers or educators, and the resources required for its administration have to be considered. These factors could affect the test's feasibility in specific educational environments. But overall, it's a valuable assessment tool, and the educational setting can be in support of the test's requirements and seek a comprehensive evaluation of adaptive behaviors. And I think there was one last slide. So in reflection, considering the use of this test with students, it is valid, particularly for special education and developmental assessment environments. Its broad scope in evaluating adaptive behaviors, such as communication, daily living skills, socialization, delivers an in-depth view of a student's capabilities. An example would be in the case of a student with autism, the test can offer vital insights into their social and communication abilities, which can be instrumental in shaping focused interventions and support strategies for us as special education teachers.